Hello! Welcome to Sensation, Origins of Our Knowledge. The origins of our knowledge has a fascinating history. Psychology's early roots begin with ancient Greek philosophers who considered how knowledge originates. And here to help us to understand the context in which those early thinkers were musing about the origins of our knowledge, we have a glorious picture of the Parthenon in ancient Greece, which was constructed more than 2,000 years ago. And it's intriguing to think that there were philosophers considering the very idea of the origins of knowledge in this structure so long ago. The question of how our knowledge originates is addressed in a very specific branch of philosophy called epistemology. We can think of it as a branch of philosophy addressing the nature of our knowledge. Epistemology might address such questions as what is the nature of our knowledge? How do we know what we know? How is knowledge acquired? These are all epistemological questions, and they've been around since the time of the ancient Greeks. To put this into some context, let's take a look at an important picture from the Italian Renaissance artist Raphael. He entitles this The School of Athens, and it was painted more than 500 years ago. On the left side of the painting, that's our left side, we have a picture of Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher. You might notice that Plato is pointing upward. He's pointing upward in his response to the question about the origins of knowledge. By pointing upward, Raphael is intimating that Plato believes that knowledge originates in the world of ideas. One way to think about that is the world of logic and the world of reason. We can think of different logical structures that are very important to us, even in mathematical proofs. This is the world of ideas. On the right, we have a different philosopher. Raphael is painting over here the philosopher Aristotle, and you might know that Aristotle actually was the student of Plato. So here we have the teacher, and we have the teacher-student. Plato, though, is pointing up, and Aristotle is pointing straight out. Notice that Aristotle points towards the real world in his response to the question of how knowledge originates. So we have a different point of view. Here we're talking about an empirical point of view, that knowledge originates from the world itself, and here we have Plato making the claim that knowledge originates from the world of ideas or from reason or logic. What's critical is that this beautiful painting captures two very important elements of any science, including psychological science. Psychological science, just like all other sciences, relies very heavily on logic, shown here on the left, and also empiricism, shown here on the right. Questions about the origin of knowledge have led to the study of sensation, and so it's important for us to begin by defining what sensation is. We can define sensation as the psychological experience that arises from stimulation of the senses. For the human animal, we typically say that we have 5 senses, and these include vision, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. Of course, not all humans have all 5 of these. You might know some folks who are unable to hear or unable to see, but generally speaking, the human animal has these 5 senses available to it. Importantly, other animals would have additional senses available to them. For example, some animals have sensitivity to magnetic fields. In fact, they have magnetoreceptors, and that allows them to respond to magnetic changes around them, something that humans would not be able to sense. Still other animals have sensitivity to electrical fields. They have electroreceptors, and they can pick up and respond to fluctuations in electrical fields around them, and these too are not available to humans. But whatever kinds of senses the animal might have available, we can think of sensation as a psychological experience that arises from stimulation of those senses. Our study of sensation will build on our earlier discussions of the environment, evolution, and the nervous system. Remember, too, that when we talk about the environment, we can go all the way back to some very, very ancient environments, including those that are addressed in big history, when we go all the way back to the Big Bang, and then through to the creation of our galaxy, and our solar system, and our planet, and life on Earth, all the way up to the point where we have organisms that are interested in investigating how their knowledge originates. Let's move forward from the world of the ancient Greeks about 2,000 years, and we'll look at slightly more recent ideas about empiricism. Empiricism is the view that experience, especially of the senses, is the only source of our knowledge. You might recall that this was hinted at in our earlier diagram of Aristotle, but more recently than that, we've had a group of philosophers that have put forth the idea that perhaps we humans begin life as more or less tabula rasa, which is to say blank slates. Let's get that into our vocabulary. Let's say that together. Tabula rasa. One more time. Tabula rasa. There you go. This trio of philosophers is known as the British empiricists, and there were certainly other British empiricists, but these are among the more famous, and they are John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume. And although they would certainly agree that there are important biological contributors to behaviors, thoughts, and feelings, these folks were strongly of the camp that much of what we know when we're thinking about the origins of our knowledge comes to us through the senses, and that essentially the environment writes on us. It writes on us through our senses. We are the blank slates as we start, and then as life goes on and the environment writes on us via our senses, we become who we are with respect to behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. Central to the British empiricist idea would be the notion of the stimulus. And this would be any form of environmental energy. And that could be visual, auditory, tactile, or chemical. We typically think of the chemical senses as being taste and smell. And of course, these can come to us by way of a gas, liquid, or solid. Before we get too far into our discussion of the stimulus, it's important that we try to get the terminology right, because this is often a sticking point for many students. The word stimulus is singular, and the word stimuli is plural. An example will help. The stimulus is important versus the stimuli are important. Notice that when we use the singular form of the verb to be, that's the word is, we use stimulus, the stimulus is important. And when we use the plural form of the verb to be, that's the word are, we would say the stimuli are important. Let's now distinguish between two different kinds of stimuli. We'll begin by understanding the so-called distal stimulus. That can be defined as energy in the environment that stimulates the senses. We often contrast the distal stimulus with the so-called proximal stimulus, which is the nervous system's response to energy in the environment. Let's first look at the distinguishing words here, the word distal versus the word proximal. The word distal should sound to you like the word distance, and in fact, the distal stimulus is a good distance away from you. By contrast, the proximal stimulus, that looks like the word approximate, or proximal, meaning near, and this is the stimulus that is so near to you, in fact, it's actually on you. Let's see if we can take a specific example. As you're watching this video, you might be looking at the top of the screen. You'll notice that my cursor is moving across the red letters, and now it's moving across the blue letters. There's a lot of light or electromagnetic energy in the environment that is being picked up by your eyes. But the fact that the energy is out here in the environment, on your screen or on your tablet or on your cell phone as you're watching this video, that is out in the distance. As the electromagnetic energy, the photons, make their way through the environment and land on your nervous system, for example, they're landing on your retina as your eyes are opening, you're watching this, now we have the proximal stimulus. We have the pattern of stimulation on your nervous system's response to that environmental energy. In this case, we can think of the proximal stimulus as the pattern of activity on your retina. And again, the distal stimulus would be the pattern of light out on whatever screen you might be viewing right now. So that's an example of a distal stimulus and its corresponding proximal stimulus in the world of vision. A related example would be very similar, but now we can think about the sounds that you're hearing. As you're listening to my voice, out there in the environment, there's going to be some set of speakers that's vibrating to create the acoustic energy that's going to make its way through the environment and land in some way on your nervous system, perhaps on your eardrums. The pattern of stimulation on your eardrums would be the proximal stimulus, and of course, the vibrations in the speakers out there in the environment would be the distal stimulus, out there in the distance. So let's wrap up the video by having you address this potential pop quiz item. Generate 3 novel, that is new examples of distal stimuli and their corresponding proximal stimuli. Good luck!